Hey everybody, we are at VanFest in Hurricane, Utah, and we're going to be doing some systems checks this weekend. We have our booth set up right over there and going to be talking electrical and doing some classes and workshops and seminars this weekend. But we're going to take you guys along on some system checks, and we're going to find some systems that are broken and in need of repair or just better understanding. So let's go see what we can find. And then it was a 12 volt system and you changed it to your wiring to 24.
The settings
Okay,
I'm
I
not
see.
sure are correct. I did the best I could.
Yeah, sure. And then you have 200 amp hours of battery.
We have 800.
800.
Yeah, I have 4.
I'll hop in and change some of these settings so that we know
I trust you.
that
Yeah.
they're good to go. Have you been seeing it get to 100%?
Rarely, but yes.
Okay, you have seen it get to 100%, but then it seems like it just falls off
Seems
really
like it falls to
quickly.
about 60 and kind of hovers around 60.
Okay, so you've got a multi-plus 24 3K up there. Links distributor down here, or 1224 here. Perfect. While I'm in there, I'm going to look at the history tab here, and we're going to take a look and see. So every time you see that 28.4 number,
That's going to be 100.
that means you're charging all the way to full.
Yeah.
And so what we can do there is we can hop back out, and I want to go to the smart shunt and make sure that it's set up to be an actual true 100. So I do see an issue here in your charged voltage. So that needs to be set 0.2 volts lower than the charged voltage of all the chargers. And the reason for that is when you get to 27 volts, 27.2 volts as you have in your smart shunt settings here, that's going to tell the smart shunt, hey, we're at 100%, when your batteries aren't actually at 100%. So we're going to change that to, your chargers are set to 28.4, so we're going to change that to 28.2. We can kind of expect them to charge to 28.4 because we've told the chargers to charge to 28.4. We've got the Orion set to charge to 28.4. We have the MPPT set up to charge to 28.4. So the shunt, we just have to tell it to, hey, once this gets to 28.4, consider that fully charged. It's going to go from 28.2 to 28.4 very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And so, the difference between 28.2 and 28.4 is going to be like, 1%, 2%. So it doesn't really matter, that little sliver. But I think what was happening is you guys were seeing 100%, and then it was dropping off from 100% very rapidly because it wasn't actually
Wasn't
100%.
really. Gotcha. Yeah.
And so I think that's going to immediately help. The other thing I'm going to change here is the battery SOC on reset. We've got that set to 100% on there. And so what that means is that whenever you turn your system off and then turn it back on, regardless of how full the batteries are or aren't, it's going to say that your batteries are at 100%. So I'm going to change this to clear. So if you turn your system off and then you turn it back on the main screen, you're going to see 2 dashes here. And that's just your shunt saying, hey, I'm not really sure exactly what our state of charge is. So let's go ahead and play it safe and let's get a full charge on. Once your system hits that charged voltage that we were talking about earlier, the 28.2, I think I said, then it's going to go ahead and go to 100%. And then, so it just takes basically a full charge to resynchronize to 100%.
Gotcha.
So you don't have that like false reading.
Yeah.
I think that, understanding that your batteries were going from 100% and falling off really rapidly, that makes sense to me with your batteries probably weren't actually at 100%.
Right.
So I think changing that should be good.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Other than that, I think it's fine. So I don't have any. Okay.
Thank you
Perfect.
so much.
Sweet.
Thank you guys.
Cool. So on the email that you sent over, you said you had it was smelling some things melting.
Yes.
Okay, some hot plastic or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to see if we can find some hot plastic, see why it's doing that, and hopefully get you set in a direction to get that fixed. So they say you just upgraded to 325 watt solar panels, 6 of them wired in, 3 of them in series, or I'm sorry, 3 panels in a series string, and then each of the series strings in parallel. So maybe that has something to do with it, but we'll find out.
So I've got the 2 arrays coming in, one right there and then one in the corner.
Okay.
And the 2 controllers.
So you have 3 of the panels coming to one charge controller, and the other 3 panels coming to the second charge controller?
Yeah.
Okay. And then those 3 panels, they're all wired in parallel to one charge controller, and the other ones are wired in parallel to the other 3.
Yes.
So I'm not seeing anything that's actually like hotter than it should be. This wire is kind of warm. This, let's see, how big is that wire? That's probably, is that 10 gauge?
I believe it's 10.
It's hard to tell. 10 gauge, probably THHN wire. You know, that could be a little undersized. You know, we use 6 gauge out of all of our 150s.
When I sized all those wires, we only had 2 panels per array.
Okay, yeah. And if that's 10, you know, that could be undersized if this is THHN wire from here to here, because 10 is usually fine on this, is typically fine on this side.
Yeah.
Because your amperage is lower on this side and your voltage is higher. And then on this side is where it drops down to 50 amps on the output.
Gotcha.
To feed into the batteries. I'm not seeing any melting here. I took this cover off. There's a little bit of heat shrink between the lug and the bus bar, but it doesn't look like it's so much that it's like interfering necessarily. I can move this lug just pretty easily, so this is kind of loose. I would say that's probably a concern, even if it's not like actively hot right now. That could be a problem like once you start using your system. Could you go turn on some bigger loads to pull some power out of the system?
Yeah.
And let's see if any of this heats up. So as that toaster's running, we can already kind of see that this wire here going from the batteries up to that bus bar is already starting to heat up a little bit.
Okay.
So you see it starting to turn orange.
Yeah.
You know, right now it's not necessarily hot enough to do anything, but if you're using that extensively, well, it smells like toast. So now we're getting some more significant heat over here on this negative wire. I'm starting to smell it now. So this wire, this negative wire coming into this inverter right here, it's just starting to climb. We're 95 degrees now, 96. I'm gonna hit 97 here in a second. Whereas it was at 78 when we started. So I would there's a little play right here. I don't know if these lugs are a little loose maybe, or if that's just how the terminals feel on these Renogy inverters. I'm not really sure, but I would say I'd probably undo these and see if they're actually tight, and then make sure these crimps are good.
Okay.
Because these wires probably came with the inverters,
They
right?
did, yeah.
So sometimes these wires, like if you keep having issues with these getting too hot, I would probably replace these wires with 2-aught wire. It seems like a lot of the wires that come with inverter chargers are sometimes undersized. You know, these companies are just trying to do the bare minimum on like supplying wires that basically just that bare minimum.
Yeah.
And then they'll be heating up, and then over time the terminals may start to break down, they'll start to loosen. As things heat up and cool down, things will start to loosen.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure vibrating as we drive around doesn't help either.
Yeah, that's also going to be a problem there. So I think what I would do is I would get in here first and put a wrench to these and tighten them up, because they definitely feel loose.
Okay.
If that doesn't work, then I would either try to recrimp these or remake these wires from the inverter to the bus bars.
And do that in 2 gauge?
I would do that in 2-aught.
2-aught.
Yeah, so 2-aught's going to be quite a bit bigger than 2 gauge.
Okay.
So I think this is probably 2 gauge here. This wire should also be replaced with bigger wire, probably 4-aught.
Okay.
Because you have 4,000 watts of inverting power available to you here, which is far too much for this probably 2-gauge wire that's here. So yeah, I would definitely upsize this to 4-aught. 4-aught's usually what we use for a 3,000 watt inverter, but I think it's going to be fine for a 4,000 watt as well.
Okay.
I wish I was able to find the actual like part that's melted. I did find this wire. Was this what was in the back?
Yeah, that's what was in the switch.
Yeah, so you can for sure tell that there's like charring there on that copper. So that was definitely causing some issues. That could have been the smell that you were smelling, because I'm getting ash on my fingers just by messing with this. So yeah, I definitely put a lug on this end.
Okay.
And lug and then crimp these to where they're not going to come loose. Yeah, so I think if it were me personally, and like I was kind of tasked with fixing this, I would probably remake all of these wires with more appropriate sizes. 2-aught from each of these to the bus bars, 4-aught from the bus bar to the battery bank, and then 4-aught in between all the batteries as well. And then revisit your fusing strategy, because there's no fuses on any of these. And so if these two wires were to short right now, if these two wires were to rub together, there's no fuses in between here and the batteries. And so you'd have thousands of, potentially 1,000 amps flowing right here. Maybe even more importantly, if this were to contact that and rub through, there's no fuses in between the bus bar and this wire, and that's on wood, and so that would absolutely start a fire.
Okay.
So, fusing at a bare minimum, all of these wires coming off of these positive terminals need to fuse, and then all of the wires coming off of the bus bar need to fuse.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of like where I'm at as far as that goes. Yeah, like I said, I couldn't find anything that was actually melting, but I see several things that could probably be melting as as things get warmer and stuff like that. So, but
the plan is for this to get moved too, so that'll free up some space.
yeah, if you did that, then I would for sure move those two over, and then put your links distributor here, and then that's going to fix all of your fusing problems.
Okay.
So, okay, sweet. Well, thanks for letting us take a look at it. Sorry I wasn't able to find the actual melted parts.
That actually helped a lot, especially like seeing that while that's running.
Yeah. That one we weren't able to find any melted parts, but we were able to find some undersized wires and non-existent fusing, which should definitely be fixed. Could be fixed with the links distributor or some MRBF fuses on the bus bars. But yeah, got pointed in the right direction. He's going to swing by. We're going to show him some of those fusing options later on, and now we'll move on to the next one. So you're saying on the email that you had some outlets that weren't working. Do they ever work? Have they ever worked? Do they work when they're on shore power or generator? Anything like that?
I haven't actually ever tried on shore power.
Okay.
You could try the generator.
Okay.
I know that the lights and everything work, and I've got a spot where you can plug in like a cigarette lighter type of thing.
Okay.
In the back, and that one works.
Perfect. Well, we'll check it out. Do any of the other 120 volt outlets work when you're not connected to shore power or generator that you know of? Are there outlets anywhere forward?
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and turn the generator on.
Okay.
And we'll see if those work.
Okay.
Okay, so we got the generator turned on. So now let's check some of these outlets. Okay, so none of the outlets are working, even when the generator is on, which that's kind of puzzling. So do you know where your standard breaker box is?
No.
Not yet? Okay, so we're gonna find that. So we do have power coming out of the generator, but now it's about finding where it's going and why it's not making it to all the outlets. Okay, so we have found the 120 volt AC distribution panel. We have power to all of these. So our air conditioner is actively running. I can feel it blowing on the back of my head, which is great. Burger. Vanity kitchen. So those should be on. Rear plug, TV, fridge, microwave. Air conditioner is definitely working, so I'm not sure why those outlets are not working. Okay, so generator off, and that kills power to all of this. So, why the outlets aren't working, I suspect there's probably some kind of wiring issue in between here and the outlets.
Okay.
Because if this is getting power and the air conditioner is running, then that means that this from here to the generator is working. It's just from here to the outlets is something going on. You know, I'm noticing that the vanity and kitchen outlet as well as the rear plug. So I almost wonder if this breaker might be bad, perhaps, because the AC is working. Does the microwave work? Have you tried it? Let's try that. Let's kick that. Let's kick the generator back on and let's see if the microwave works. Chad, would you try the microwave? So weren't able to get the generator fired back up. I would check and see if your microwave is working. If your microwave is working, I would start to think that this breaker could potentially be bad.
Okay. Just that specific one.
Yeah, this specific little tandem breaker here, because both of those circuits are in the same tandem breaker. So, you know, if you're comfortable with it, you could get behind here. Otherwise, you know, I think any RV repair place would be able to get into the back of this, or any person who's electrically inclined. I don't have the tools to get back there with me, nor do I have the parts to replace that breaker if we determine that was actually the problem.
Got it.
But that is what I would suspect. The fact that the air conditioner is working tells me that everything's getting from the generator to here, and then from here to the outlets is probably the problem. So that's the direction I'd probably point you in that one.
Okay.
We weren't able to find a fix on it, but I think we were able to narrow it down. You know, when you can trace power from the source of power to a distribution panel, and then something after the distribution panel is not working, at least it gives you some direction. The fact the air conditioner was working means that the generator is working, as well as the breaker box itself is getting power. I think that breaker was probably bad, or maybe some of the wires on the back of the outlet had wiggled loose. It was a 94 model van, so what, 30-ish years old, or nearly 30 years old, so that could have been the problem. So day number 2, bright and early, 8:45, off to our first system check. So this one is going to be, solar array is just not producing as much power as they think it should be. And so we're gonna kind of dive into the settings and see how much solar it's actually making versus how much solar it should be making. 1,000 watts of solar up on the roof. So let's go check it out. Morning.
Good morning. It is.
It is. All right, so you've got 1,000 watts of solar on the roof, and you don't feel like it's charging as much as you.
I'm only getting 400 watts out of
Only
it
getting 400 watts.
at this point.
I see. Okay, so the first thing that I'm usually doing whenever I'm looking for like solar production is Victron Connect app, and then getting into the charge controller over to the history tab. And then I'm going to look through the Pmax function, which I think you and I have talked about that a few times. Seeing 470 watts yesterday, 513 the day before, 433, 450, 540, 400. So we're never seeing above 600 watts out of the 1,000 watts of solar that you have up there. So we do have lithium batteries back there. On the battery max, I'm seeing 14.2, 14.1, 13.8, 13.8, 13.7, 13.6. So this is telling me that the batteries are never fully charging. Does that seem accurate?
It does.
Okay. The other thing I'm also checking out is the Vmax in the app here. So that's going to tell us the max voltage that the panels are putting out. And you've got 3 solar panels. And do you happen to know what the voltage of the panels are?
I thought it was 39.7.
39.7, so we should be seeing, and they're wired in series.
Yes.
So we've got, so 120 volts, which is what I'm seeing here. I'm seeing 117, 120, 116, 117, 113, 107. That's consistent with a day of low wattage, so maybe it was cloudy or something that day. So I'm going to hop into the settings here and check those out and see what we've got there. So the good news is I found a problem in the settings. So we've got max charge current right here. So you've got a MPPT 250/85, which means that it can put out up to 85 amps. And in the settings here, we've got that set to 30 amps. So it's only ever going to ask for that, 500 to 600 watts from solar. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to 85.
Yeah, I was really curious about that.
Yeah, so you want to have, unless you have a really good reason to, you always want that to be set at the max amperage that the charge controller can put out. Those SOK batteries, they can charge at a rate of 50 amps per battery, and you've got 3 of them, so we can charge up to 150 amps. So 85 amps is going to be just fine for that. Absorption voltage is a little low. That really wasn't affecting the rate at which you were charging, but I'm going to go ahead and change that anyway while I'm in here. I'm going to change that to 14.6 like it says on the side of the battery. Float voltage, we can leave it at 13.8. Lithium batteries don't really float, so that doesn't really matter. But I think the max charge current is going to fix the problem for sure. It's pretty early in the morning right now, so we're probably not going to see full wattage. We're currently seeing only 80 watts, but the sun just came up. So, so I'm going to change this. I'm going to change a few other settings, and then I'm going to have you use some power throughout the day, and then check back in with us this afternoon, and let us know if that kind of fixes the problem, because I suspect it will. So that was just going to be a settings issue. Charge controller was set to low. Had him check back in later in the afternoon. We'll make sure it was all good. But when you have that set to only 30 amps on a 85 amp charge controller with 1,000 watts of solar, you're basically telling the charge controller, hey, I don't want you to put out as much power. So changing that is probably going to immediately fix that problem.
Our setup,
Okay, cool.
and they added in the switch so that when it switches back and forth between the car battery and this one to charge them both.
Gotcha. So your
Something never seen before.
Yep. So your starting battery is under your floorboard.
Yes,
and
it's under the driver's seat.
And then these two
That's
AGMs are powering the rest
to make
of the
it
house.
12.
Okay.
Yes.
Sweet. Yeah. Cool.
So everything we run is 12, and then we have an inverter for a couple plug-in items.
Perfect.
We have a little bullet blender that doesn't have a big draw out.
Yep.
And then the only thing that
Because we don't live full time in ours.
Yep.
right.
Okay.
You know that.
Yeah.
Is when I have my tea kettle. It's a plug-in AC,
Yep.
but to ramp up to get it started, it will not.
So we have
It
to
won't
start
do
the
it
car
on the
and then we
inverter.
can turn the tea kettle on.
Okay.
But the car has to be running the whole time. So for like the 6-7 minutes,
Yeah.
and then we don't really love the fact that we're busting diesel at people in tents and whatever. else.
Sure. Yeah. Understand. Okay.
Okay.
Let's check out what we've got going on in
Okay.
the back.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
And then
You're right.
how are you?
So we've got this sucker,
Oh, perfect. So that's.
and then we have
somewhere
the
in there.
Victron app.
Okay,
Microwave.
so I am seeing a settings issue that we've got going on
Cool.
here.
Okay.
Just fix it.
So we've got the charging voltage from the solar array is set to 14.7 volts, and on the BMV 712 we've got our charged voltage set to 13.2, which means that this is thinking that the batteries are full long before they're actually full. So at 14.7, I'm going to change this to 14.5.
Even though you said it was 13.6.
Yes, yeah, because if the charge controller is charging to 14.7, then we want the BMV, this gauge here, to register a 100% charge whenever it gets just shy of full charge.
Got it.
The difference between 14.5 volts and 14.7 volts is probably 1% or 2, so it's close enough.
Okay.
And so we always want, anytime solar is charging the batteries, we want the shunt for this gauge to detect that it's actually full.
Okay.
So just going through here, some of the other settings, everything else looks so.
I mean, and
now
can you
that-
tell the battery health from that app?
Not really.
Okay. We've
How
had them for almost 4 years.
they're probably getting pretty close to the
That's
end of their
that's my
lifespan.
question. That's my biggest question is that.
And I think
do
that's
we
why
upgrade?
when this was pulling from the inverter and the heat was on, that's why
It
we
was
were
too
like,
much for it.
So basically, it's the end of the day right now. You're not going to get the rest of your charging for today. And so that number is going to be inaccurate. It's probably a little lower than 80%. It's hard for me to tell like what it is specifically.
Right.
But tomorrow, whenever you get a full charge from your solar, because it looks like your solar has been working really good.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, just based on
That's great.
seeing
That's good to
every
know.
single day. Okay, actually, could you unlock this one more time?
Yeah.
Seeing every single day that
The history of it or whatever.
So what I'm looking at here is the battery max voltage.
Okay.
And then, so what we can see here is the fact that at some point in time today, it charged up to 14.7. So that's full. 14.6.
It did reach full, and then it just started going.
Yeah,
It
that's
cycles.
almost full. 14.8 full, 14.8 full,
This is sitting in
14.7
our
full.
driveway.
Yep, so you weren't using any power, so not a lot of power was going in. But it seems like it's charging to full like pretty much every day,
Great.
which that's great. So it's like if you
Because we were told to keep them full.
yeah, yes, yeah, perfect.
The batteries are supposed to be full, right?
And we have a shore power in
yeah,
case we were
yeah.
parked in shade at our house or something, or we just plug it in. But since we're in Colorado, so we always get full sun.
Yeah, so
So that's awesome. Now, the thing that I've been wondering about is how is our battery? How much longer do you think? And what should we do after?
Compared to
the
everything.
issue with lithium in your scenario is going to be that it's under the hood.
Okay.
Lithium batteries, they like to operate within like
Like if they were
let's
in
call
here.
it like freezing to 110 degrees.
Got it.
Yeah.
So they have to be in that range.
Okay.
If they're under the hood with that diesel motor and you're
It's gonna get hotter.
climbing,
Hotter, colder.
if you're going up Loveland Pass or whatever,
Yeah.
it's going to start overheating.
Okay.
And then those batteries are
shit.
going to get maybe
Unhappy.
lose some lifespan.
Got it.
They may shut down. I don't remember what the shutdown temperature of like Battleborn batteries are, or many other lithium batteries, but
Okay.
I think it's in the ballpark of like 130, 140 kind
But
of
is there a
thing.
way for us to get hot water like out of a tea kettle without having to start the engine?
I think it's a small battery,
Okay.
coupled with it's an older battery.
So I just turn on the car for 5 minutes, let it boil, and then I move on. But maybe we just get a new tea kettle.
That's a great suggestion.
Thank you.
And just give that a shot. That'd be a cheap
Okay.
way to do that. So this system, 2 AGM batteries. I think they're just reaching the end of their useful life. AGM batteries gonna last about 3 to 5 years, and these were 4 years old. So that coupled with a settings change, which is the theme for this show, the settings changes. Change that setting so they should have a little better idea of what 100% actually is on those batteries. And then it's going to be time to start looking for more batteries if they're dropping too far. Winter's coming up, and so winter is hard on batteries, especially when they're under the hood, kind of exposed to the cold temperatures like they will be in Colorado. So I think those are the two issues that they were having. Well, sorry for the abrupt change of scenery, but Steph and I and the team are back in Colorado. Mother Nature had plans for us that did not involve videoing more system checks. It got super windy last night, and we did system checks, but ultimately the wind was blowing like 50 miles an hour, and audio, you couldn't hear anything. So I hope that you enjoyed the system checks that we were able to show with you. Kind of my, summary of what we saw was a lot of settings issues. So the main takeaway here is set all of your chargers to the same charging voltage, whether that's 14.4 or 14.6, whatever it is for your batteries, and then set your battery monitor charged voltage to 0.2 volts below whatever the charging voltage of your chargers is, and that should fix a lot of settings. We ran into a lot of Renogy monitors and such, and I don't really deal with Renogy that much, so it was kind of hard to pinpoint exactly how those monitors worked and the settings needed. We recommend Victron Smart Shunt, Victron BMV712, and they have those settings, and we know what they are, and we can set them and we can fix all those problems. So, consider, if you're trying to upgrade your system, get into like a Victron Smart Shunt. It's a little over $100, and it's going to solve a lot of battery monitoring problems. And we have those available in our store. But I hope you enjoyed this season of shows and the system checks that we brought you on. This is the last show that we're doing this year. We do have more on the schedule for next year, although we haven't publicly released our schedule. So that's all for this video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.